Hi, welcome back to Israel Undiplomatic. I'm Ruthie Blum.
And I'm Mark Regev.
And we'd like to remind you to like, subscribe, share our podcast, JNS TV and jns.org. Anyway, Mark, I haven't seen you since this dramatic hostage rescue operation. I just wanted to know, where were you when you heard about it?
So it was actually interesting. I was at a bar mitzvah. My wife has 4 sisters. The younger sister, her son had a bar mitzvah. And we were in a synagogue in Ramat Efal. And then afterwards we had sit down and eat something. And Ramat Efal is right next to the Tel HaShomer hospital. And we heard a helicopter go over at about midday. And we thought, that's not a good sign. Some soldier is being, injured in battle, and they're taking him, who else comes on helicopters to hospitals, especially military helicopters. And on the way home, I'm driving, so when I drive, I try not to look at my smartphone. But my wife says to me, she says, Mark, there's been a release of hostages, including Noah Argaman. And I said, is that just on WhatsApp that you're getting, and it could be something that's irresponsible? And she says, I'm checking. And then she goes to some of the news websites, and she says, no, it's true. And we got home, and we turned on the TV, and like the rest of the country, it was an amazing day. To think that we got these 4 people out in what was ultimately a very dramatic and successful counter-terrorist operation. I think it's something all Israelis were proud about. Where were you?
Well, like you, started seeing gossip online, and I said, don't trust this. And then I turned on the TV. I saw it was actually real. And I'll tell you something interesting. First of all, it was also true that a soldier was wounded. He ended up dying. Mm-hmm. He is such a hero that this operation is being named after him, the way the Entebbe raid was named after Netanyahu's brother, Yoni. It's called Operation Yonatan, and here we're calling it Operation Aranon, after this incredibly brave counterterrorism soldier. The rescue, so the thing that was so amazing is that, first of all, I think I'm not the only one who burst into tears. And by the way, speaking of that day, I actually phoned you because I was trying to think of all the people I could phone. It was a Shabbat. All of the people I could call on that day that would answer my call. And I called you and you didn't answer.
So I apologize. What happened was, because I was in synagogue in the morning, as a good secular Jew, I know, though, that when you go into a synagogue, you put your phone on silent. And obviously I forgot to take it off silent.
So you missed my call.
I apologize.
So I was just I was trying to let everybody know. And it's very interesting because I wasn't the only person this happened to, of course. So many people in Israel keep the Sabbath. So out of solidarity, apartment buildings all over Israel, the secular neighbors were writing signs to put up in the staircase saying, we had an amazing rescue operation, naming the names of the hostages, and people were sticking their heads out of windows and calling to other Israelis walking home from synagogue and screaming it out to them. And it was just a moment. First of all, we've all been so traumatized by October 7th and by this war and by the international community attacking us. This was finally this moment, this kind of elation. We felt solidarity. And another point was, I live very near the beach, and a lifeguard was a bunch of people on the beach like you. They started hearing things on their phone, and they ran up to the lifeguard and said, you have to announce this to the public. And he said, well, I'm not allowed to use the loudspeaker for that. So he called his bosses in the municipality, and they gave him permission. So he got up there, and it's all on tape. The video went viral, where he announced to the whole beach this rescue operation, and people cheered. But the thing was, we were all weeping. Do you realize reporters on TV, even this hardened journalist, Israeli, they couldn't stop crying while they were talking about it. So this was an amazing day, and
can I say?
So that's it.
I want to say, first of all, we've had a lot of bad news over the last couple of months, right? And so to have good news, people embraced that, and it was really good. Secondly, the young woman Noa Argamani, right? Everyone knew her. The picture of her on the back of the motorcycle being kidnapped, everyone has seen. And because the mother, born in China and very sick with cancer, and giving interviews that she wanted to see her daughter before she died. Right? It all made, everyone was talking about her, and less so about the 3 men who were rescued at the same time. But let's be fair, maybe Noa Argamani would have been set free if there was a successful hostage deal. The 3 men would have been at the end of any list. And so those Israeli soldiers who risked their lives to bring those 4 hostages out, first of all, they're all heroes. And I think, it's a message that we still are at the top of our game when we choose to be at the top of our game.
I think it's a really crucial message. And unfortunately, it didn't take long for the protest movement that same night. That happened Saturday, early in the day, Saturday night. Again, some Israelis and some of the hostage families were out saying, this proves we need to sign a deal quickly. Now, some people would have said it does. On the contrary, it shows that we can rescue them. Now, nobody's under the illusion that we could perform such an operation and get out 120 hostages like that. No. But here's the trouble. The trouble is there is no deal on the table. That there's a fantasy in the minds of some of the hostage families, not all, and many of the, I would say, more cynical protesters who really don't have the hostages in mind. Really, they have in mind toppling the Netanyahu government. But one of the things they've been saying is, we need to sign a deal. We need to sign a deal. So here's the thing. First of all, the deal is a very bad deal, but we did agree to sign it. Even Secretary of State Antony Blinken just said so. He came here. He went to Jordan. He went to Israel. He's now in Qatar, I believe. He went to Egypt. And he said it. Hamas is not willing. They keep changing their demands. We knew they would. So here's the question. Since they're not offering, it's not that, okay, if we cease firing, we're going to get all the hostages out. I think it's really important to stress that. And secondly, it's also important to stress that after that amazing, lovely operation, the world started to say that we just killed all these innocent Gazans.
I saw that there was this total 2 worlds, because the Israeli media, like the Israeli public, was in euphoria. We'd saved these 4 people from captivity. The army had done this fantastic job, a dangerous job, a mission where countless things could have gone wrong, and it all went right. We got the people out, and the whole country is celebrating. And then you turn to one of the international networks, and it's all this stuff coming out of Gaza. In the end, I think the Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health in Gaza said 270 Palestinians were killed on that day, and over 700 injured, and everyone's talking about, and you hear this sort of voice on the international networks, CNN, BBC, well, the Israelis might have got 4 people out, but at what price? And I think I would always ask if Americans were being held hostage, right, or if Brits were being held hostage, the publics in those countries wouldn't demand that the government, if there was a military option. Jimmy Carter, you've written about this. Jimmy Carter sent in the U.S. military to try to save the hostages who were being held at the embassy in Tehran.
I wouldn't want to use Jimmy Carter as a good example because I'll tell you, only because he did, but he also was so afraid, you understand, at the time when Delta Force was planning this operation, the CIA director, I believe, said, well, how are you going to do it? And he began to explain, we're going to go there, we'll climb over the wall of the embassy, and we'll take out the guards. And he said, wait a minute. What do you mean take them out? You mean kill them? I said, yeah. So I don't like to use certain examples. The West tends not to like to kill anybody. However, I just want to say one thing. Their figures may be wrong, and maybe they're right, but who cares? Those civilians could have told Israel where the hostages were being held. They were held in the homes of civilians. One was a doctor. The 3 young men were held in the home of a doctor and his son, a journalist who writes for the Palestine Chronicle, which is an American-funded publication. So The point is, this war would have ended immediately if the hostages had been returned and Hamas surrendered. So, I'm personally, I have no pity on the Gazans. None.
Can I tell you, even in the Arab world, there was an interview with one of the Hamas leaders for a television station in the Emirates, in the UAE. And the anchor, she asked the Hamas leader, did you not deliberately endanger all the civilians in the area by putting the hostages, holding them in a civilian area? In other words, and of course, the Hamas guy waffles. He doesn't have a good answer. But those questions were even being raised in the Arab world. And when Blinken, who I know you're not a great fan of, Ruthie, but as you said, he just said in Qatar, he said this war, the bloodshed could stop if Hamas agreed to this deal. He said Hamas is not only entrenched in positions, it's actually gone back on positions. And I think people have to remember Hamas doesn't give a hoot, forget about Israeli lives. They don't give a hoot about the lives of Palestinians in Gaza.
Worse than not giving a hoot. They want Palestinians killed because they know that the West will attack. They want them dead. Now, Blinken, I'll tell you, you're right. I'm not a fan of his for many reasons. Way before this war started, Blinken belongs in the appeasement school of foreign relations, appeasing Iran, seeing the West and seeing that everybody is everything and everybody's the same, all right? Which is very dangerous when you have a global jihadist war going on. But what also really annoys me is, yes, he's making that statement, but when you read the statement, if you were from Mars, you wouldn't understand that Hamas is not, it's not some, it's not a European country. And okay, you didn't agree to these conditions and they didn't agree to those conditions. Sometimes this has been compared to Ireland and England. And I'm sorry, no, as bad a conflict as that was, and maybe still isn't to some respect, you cannot compare Hamas, which is, first of all, it's part of a bigger global jihadist axis. But aside from that, they're not acting like rational actors in international relations. They're very rational in terms of their own ideology. You kill as many civilians on both sides as you can, then you get an appeasing Europe and America to basically say, well, you have to understand on the one hand and on the other hand. And then Sinwar is sitting in his cave laughing at Blinken. This is very, very bad for America, too. It's not just bad for Israel.
You talk about attacks, and I don't think we can forget that just this week yesterday, some 200 rockets, and people forget about it. It doesn't get a lot of press internationally, but some 200 rockets, drones were fired from Lebanon into Israel. I think it was a new record in one day, reaching south to Tiberias, to the Jordan Valley, places where up until now have been relatively free from this sort of attack. The apologists for Hezbollah will say it was in response to Israel taking out a senior Hezbollah commander. But I don't think they need an excuse to shoot rockets into Israel.
No, because they've been shooting rockets now daily since October 8th. But I mean, in the last couple of weeks, it's just escalated.
My impression has been that while we were focused on Gaza, Israel was interested in sort of keeping things as low flame as possible on the northern border. But it looks to me like now that policy is becoming unsustainable and that it's quite possible that we're going to have to do something in the north.
Well, what I'm hoping, I got to tell you, I don't want our government letting the enemy know about any of our moves. So I don't mind that I'm not being kept informed by anybody in the army or the government about what we're going to do about the north. I know that the northern residents who are evacuated and their mayors are very, very furious at the government. Where are you? What are you doing? What I'm hoping, I think that the hostage rescue operation showed something. That was in the works for a long time, and we knew nothing about it. And I am hoping that right now something similar is going on about maybe a surprise attack in Lebanon that we have to do. But they're not telling us, and they're letting us just keep getting angry and saying we're sitting ducks. I'm hoping, and I actually believe, that that is what is going on behind the scenes. At the moment, I believe and trust in that, and that rescue operation restored my faith in things going on that we don't know about that we would be proud of.
I hope that's true. I think the northern situation is obviously more dangerous for Israel than Gaza. I know it's hard to believe considering what we've been through with Hamas, but Hezbollah's military capabilities exceed exponentially those of Hamas. And the number of rockets they have, 150,000, I'm told. They are rockets with greater distances that can carry larger payloads of explosives and with greater accuracy than anything that Hamas has. And
not to mention drones, by the way.
Of course. And they have the ability to hit targets very, very accurately. Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa, I think almost all of Israel. And we should be very, very thoughtful about how we proceed against Hezbollah. It's clear that we can't stand for what's been happening. It's clear we have to act. My question is it possible to hit Hezbollah and hit Hezbollah hard, but at the same time avoid a full-scale, all-out war? In other words, they've said to us, it's a border war. So we hit them in the south, we hit them hard. Can we do that without having a situation where there are missiles on Tel Aviv and then we have to do counter-strikes on Beirut? That's the question I have.
Now listen, we've been saying for a long time now that since Lebanon is responsible for Hezbollah, not to mention the fact that Hezbollah sits in the Lebanese parliament and everything, and Lebanon doesn't really have a government right now, but Lebanon is responsible. And if we're holding Lebanon accountable for Hezbollah movements, then the question is, why not go directly to Beirut? What you need to do is put pressure on the Lebanese people to say to Hezbollah, you better stop. You're ruining our lives here. Because clearly, Hezbollah doesn't mind. Hezbollah has Iran's backing. Maybe we're going about this the wrong way, and we should have been. The fact is, there are many Israelis saying, excuse me, I'm out of my home, and it's going up in flames, and people in Beirut are sitting at cafes. No. Well, excuse me, they're all sitting in their homes. They're not evacuated. There is something wrong about this. The enemy has brought our war inside our borders in the south and the north.
So I would say the following. I think the message has been clear from Israel, and maybe that's one of the reasons that Hezbollah so far, they've done terrible things, but they haven't used their entire capability. And that's because I think Hezbollah understands that the people of Lebanon will be furious with them if Hezbollah launches a war that turns a place like Beirut into Gaza. And we have to, that message has to be clear, that you launch all-out war against us, we will respond. We will respond in a way like we have in Gaza. We will not stand for it. And I think maybe the threat of that sort of situation, which puts Hezbollah, Hezbollah likes to present itself, we're the saviors of Lebanon, we're the saviors of the Muslim world and so forth. But if they are seen in Lebanon as pushing Israel into an attack on Lebanon, then they lose all any legitimacy that they have. If they are seen by the Lebanese as opening a front for the Palestinians or for Iran, but not for any Lebanese interest. There used to be a joke many years ago that we don't know who the first Arab state that will make peace with Israel, but we know the second one will be Lebanon, because Lebanese were very moderate. They were, used to be the Paris of the Middle East. They were making money. They were living in, relative harmony. All that fell apart in the 1970s. And now Hezbollah, as you say correctly, unfortunately controls Lebanon and has led Lebanon to become a failed state, right? That's the truth. Their economy is falling apart. Their political structure has fallen apart. Hezbollah is more powerful than the Lebanese military. People don't know that, but that's the truth. So to what extent is Hezbollah going to unleash war that will bring death and destruction across Lebanon? And that's the question.
That is a question. And here I want to, again, criticize the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. Again, putting pressure on Israel. Every time this happens, they say, hold up, let's not escalate. That word, let's not escalate. No, let's be sitting ducks. No, let's see. Do you realize the idea that we now, okay, so we need to build better bomb shelters. We need to, what is it we need? We need to build better hotels for evacuees. This is an untenable situation. Now, it's true, we've said we have to first finish the war in Gaza, mainly finish off Rafah, our operation in Rafah, before we can move to the north. I'm no military expert. I've heard different views on this. But one thing I know is that the United States has got to stop pressuring us because we're the only open door. It should help us. It should be our ally. It should stop saying, okay, we'll just give more aid into Gaza, which Hamas will steal, by the way. It's got to be giving a message to the enemies. They are also the enemies of the United States. And this is a terrible situation. We cannot do this by ourselves without that support.
I would also say to the Secretary of State, I'd say to him, look, you're looking for a diplomatic solution in Lebanon where Hezbollah will not be on the border anymore. People talk about the UN Resolution 1701, which says there should not be any Hezbollah armed forces whatsoever south of the Litani, right? And of course, that's just, unfortunately, it's a piece of paper that doesn't have no one's pushing it.
It didn't from the first moment.
Yeah, but I think, and we've discussed this on the podcast, Israeli military action can actually augment and make diplomacy more serious than just hanging around and waiting for a diplomatic solution. That's why I think Israeli military action is increasingly becoming essential.
Absolutely. Look, the thing is, everything in this equation about what you do when you're under attack has been turned upside down, which is to say your enemy attacks you. It should be the one begging you. You should be victorious, and it should be begging you for a deal, not you begging it for a deal. And this has been a huge mistake of ours throughout our history. It is because it's true. We're Jews, it's a Jewish state, and we're Western. We are a Western country in the Middle
democracy.
East. Yes, and a democracy, but mainly with Western ideas, and we're in the Middle East, where those ideas don't fly, even though we keep imagining they do. We say, oh, look, this one is modernizing, that one's modernizing. You know, in Iran, before the revolution in 79, women were wearing miniskirts and their cigarettes were hanging out of their mouths and they were sitting at cafes.
Your type of women.
My type of women. But let's not kid ourselves about who the Shah of Iran was. Listen, he's a billion times better than the Ayatollahs, of course. But this idea that somehow, you know, they're just modernizing. They're modern. We say that about Saudi Arabia. It's all well and good. But let's not kid ourselves. They're not the Upper West Side of Manhattan. They are modern compared to maybe the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, the Stone Age, yes.
So we are part of the Middle East, and we have to find friends and allies in the Middle East. And I would say to you, Ruthie, that we can find allies, we can find partners. Look, everyone talks about the UAE, and the UAE is a good partner for Israel. The UAE, you know, I see the planes to Dubai are full of Israeli tourists who are stopping there on their way to Asia or just going there, and the Abraham Accords were amazing. Should Israel have said, well, we only agree to make peace with the Arab countries when they are democratic like we are?
No, on the contrary, but we did but this is my point.
All right.
You say we need allies.
Yeah.
We made alliances with the Gulf states. We were on the way to making an alliance with Saudi Arabia. We have made these alliances, okay? And guess what's jeopardizing those alliances? Our appearing weak. America is, under this administration, is weakening the Abraham Accords. It's making peace with Saudi Arabia less likely. Those governments suddenly, they're saying, oh, maybe we'll meet with the Iranian ambassador. There are moves going on with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and the others, and Morocco even, looking at us. And they're thinking, because again, they don't have Western thinking, they have Middle Eastern thinking, which is, you got to be the strong horse. That's the reason they decided to join forces with us. If they think that America, under this administration, and Israel currently in this war and being maybe beaten by Sinwar, they're saying we got to be careful about, we're hedging our bets.
So I agree with you 100% on that point, that any peace deal we have with the Arabs is based on Israeli strength. That's Israeli military strength, hard power, good old-fashioned hard power, and it's also Israeli moral strength, Israeli diplomatic strength, and so forth.
Economic strength.
Economic strength, 100%. Crucial. There's the famous story, Sadat, who was the first, the President of Egypt, the first one to make peace with Israel, over 4 decades ago. He said, we tried to beat the Israelis in war, right? We can't defeat them. We've got to learn to live with them. It's a bit like Jabotinsky, Zev Jabotinsky, the father of revisionist Zionism. He said, the iron wall, we show we're strong, we show we're here to stay, and then as a result of that, the Arabs will come and accept us as a legitimate part of the region. So Israeli strength is an integral part of any peace process. And we have to be strong. The Arabs are looking for partners, they're looking for allies, also in their struggle against Iran, and no one needs a weak ally. You need strong allies, you need strong partners.
Exactly.
And Israel has to be strong. That's one of the reasons, by winning this war in Gaza and proving that we are the stronger party, that's a crucial message. I still think peace with Saudi Arabia, a breakthrough with Saudi Arabia, is still possible. I hope it's true. And here I want to tell you,
a weak America, is it possible? I'm
actually, a weak America is maybe, or the perception that America is moving away from the Middle East has actually helped us, I think, make
not
peace with the Arabs.
Towards Iran.
No, correct. That's 100% correct.
Appeasing Iran is not the same as not intervening in the Middle East.
But let's say when our Arab partners are worried about a new isolationism in America, or America pivoting to Asia and moving away from the Middle East, Israel, they know, is not going to become neo-isolationist. They know Israel is part of the region, and they see Israel as a strong partner, and it's crucial that we show them, the Arab world, we are strong. It goes against the common, there's this thing out there that people say, Israel is killing,
Yeah, the common wisdom or the lies.
And it's just making the Arabs hate us. On the contrary, by showing that we're strong and that we can defeat the Hamas, right, we're making ourselves a more legitimate and desirable partner for people across the Arab world.
Well, that's true, except, something, this just brings me, speaking of alliances and all that, on Saturday, as we were being hit with that amazing news, we knew that in a few hours that night, Benny Gantz, the minister without portfolio in the current government, who joined the emergency unity government and was sitting in the war cabinet, announced 2 weeks earlier that on that day he was going to resign from the war cabinet and from the government, unless Netanyahu agreed to a whole list of things which were peculiar, since Netanyahu already, it was really policies he was already implementing. But anyway, comes this amazing rescue operation, and I think even Gantz realized that this wouldn't be great timing to do that, so he canceled his press conference. And then, surprisingly, he only postponed it for 24 hours, because the next evening he got up and made this, excuse me, I have to be careful about my wording, made a ridiculous speech. It was really, if you listen to it, but if you afterwards read the transcript, you realize how an embarrassing speech. But my question also is, what is the purpose in the middle of this war? What is the purpose of doing that? And whether in the end it will really make any difference in our war effort, I don't know.
So I think it wasn't good for the country that he left the government. I understand the politics behind it. He's doing very well in the polls, and he thinks he's the alternative prime minister, and he has to distance himself from Netanyahu.
Only in some polls, by the way.
Correct. And his numbers have gone down. I mean, he was once well in the high 30s, and now he's gone down. He's in the 20s somewhere in most polls, right? But having said all that, right, I think it's not good for the country that he's left the government. I think, your son has been fighting in Gaza as a reservist. I think when we're fighting a war and soldiers are getting killed, right, and we're fighting a difficult war which may expand, as we said a moment ago, to the north, yes? I think the idea of having people from different political stripes in the government to show that this is a government that represents all Israelis. It's a time for unity now. And I understand the politics behind his decision. I know inside the Likud there are many people who don't like him and so forth. But I think despite political differences, and I'm not sure how big they are sometimes, that it would have been better for the country at this time of fighting a war that he would have chosen to stay in the government.
Yes, well, I think you're right. Although I've got to tell you, there have been real problems with the show of a lack of unity, both in the war cabinet, and that's been a problem. On the other hand, it hasn't only been a problem from Gantz. It's been a problem from within Netanyahu's own Likud party, and I'm referring to Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. And so the question is, look, well, of course we always have disagreements and all that. But, the question is, okay, if you get a bunch of people together, does that constitute unity? Is there such a thing? Can we make that happen? No, what we really need, I think one thing we were united in is the desire to win this war. Unfortunately, the unity didn't exist in the minds of those who are already calculating the next elections. And that's a problem, because there's all these polls. We shouldn't be, in my opinion, all these political polls, we should leave them alone.
Ruthie, I'm going to say something to you, and don't be offended, but I think what you just said is borders on naivety. Why? To say that any democratic politician in Israel or anywhere doesn't think about the politics of decisions he takes is just an illogical assumption. When President Biden says things about the Middle East, he's not concerned about November. When Benny Gantz leaves the government, he's not making also a political exercise.
Perfect comparison.
Yeah, and no, but let's be frank. I mean, also our prime minister is a very successful politician. He didn't get reelected so many times, right, by being a political novice. So I think all politicians make political calculations. I think the decision to leave the government at this time of war is a mistake.
Well, I hope he's punished.
I think it's also a political mistake for Gantz.
Yes, I was about to say one good comparison between Gantz and the Biden administration is that both of them are doing things that if I were their advisors, if I were on their side, I'd be saying, are you crazy? Do you want to lose the election? Biden actually is in an election year. In a few months, Israel is not in an election year. But my point is, both of them are doing something that I don't know who's advising them, because what everything Biden is doing about the Middle East and anti-Semitism and everything else that's going on in America, he's marching himself into defeat. And I think Benny Gantz the same about himself, his own party.
We will see. And I want to thank you for this conversation. I look forward to being with you next week. This week was episode 6.
Yes.
And so next week we'll meet for episode 7.
We will indeed.
You look after yourself, Ruthie.
You too, Mark.